Welcome to NarrativeNook audio tales where enchanted stories come to life. If you enjoy our stories, please subscribe, like and share to support our channel. Enjoy listening. The Terman family was powerful because of the mastery of the most powerful robotic technology, almost to the point of making Macrunia the most powerful nation on Earth. Their influence spread over the world, just because they possessed a top-notch core technology in robotic weapons manufacturing. Technology had developed to a level that robots had gradually become the most powerful combat weapon. No country could fight a robotic weapon-equipped force. But because of the difficulty of manufacturing and the rarity of the material, robots were rare. But one robot had the combat strength of 1,000 troops. That was why the Terman family could almost do whatever they wanted in Macrunia. Some time ago, however, when Macrunia requisitioned the Terman family's robots, she suffered an almost fatal defeat on the battlefield. The enemy had used the same robotic weapons, even twice as many, and almost instantaneously shattered and destroyed the Terman family's robots. Macrunia lost badly in that battle. After that, the government of Macrunia demanded an explanation from the Terman family. People from the Terman family were among the best robotic talents. From the footage they retrieved from the battlefield, they were almost sure that the enemy had used the same robotic weapon as the one they made. There was only one explanation: the enemy had stolen their robotic design drawings, mass-produced the robotic weapon, and used it against them. Everyone's face looked grave at the thought of this. Faced with the leak of the family's core secrets and the claim of compensation from the Macrunian government, the entire Terman family was facing an unprecedented crisis. The biggest problem was that they did not know who had stolen their trade secrets. Each robot produced by the Terman family bore the family crest with a conspicuous Ouroboros logo, while the enemy's robots had none of these on them. Simon was the first to speak. He looked emotionally at Elijah across from him. "Now that things have come to such a pass, are you still not willing to reveal the Dodge Tomahawk in its physical form?" There were only 2 Dodge Tomahawks in the world, and both were made by the Terman family. It was much more powerful than people could imagine. But no one else except Elijah had seen the Dodge Tomahawks. Not even Simon and his 2 other brothers. The Dodge Tomahawk was said to be equipped with the most advanced robotic system in the world, and unlike the robotic weapons that the Terman family usually produced, the Dodge Tomahawk represented the most advanced combat strength. Unlike outsiders, they knew very well that the Dodge Tomahawk was not just a motorcycle but also what it really meant. But as much as they knew, it was still useless, as these people from the Terman family had never seen it once. So upon hearing Simon's question, not only Eber and Mary, but even those indirect descendants were eager to see it. Elijah's expression remained unchanged. He squinted at them without saying anything. Simon was not expecting anything. He quickly looked at Elijah and said covetingly, "If we can't see the Dodge Tomahawk, can you give us a drawing of it so we can study it?" Then, he seemed to realize that he had revealed too much of his intention and tried to cover it up. "Half of it? Maybe not. How about 1/4 of it?" he said. Elijah raised his eyes, glanced at Simon insouciantly, and said in a tone of voice that revealed none of his emotion, "It's not time yet." It was not just Simon, but even Mary was looking at Elijah with bafflement. She also became impatient. "When will it be time? The faster we got a hand on the drawing to study it, the earlier we could gain an advantage in the conflict." Elijah looked at his sister, still expressionless. He then looked at the others, who had different expressions. "You can't. Not only you, but we all can't do it." "What?" This time, even Eber was a little surprised. Mary is a well-known robotic expert in the family. Yet Elijah said not even she was qualified to study the drawing. What is he thinking, or who is he waiting for? Since the start of the crisis, Elijah has been under tremendous pressure, but he still seems to be confident thinking of this. There was a thoughtful look in his eyes. "I'm stodgy, but not stupid. None of us in the Terman family is stupid. If I can think of it, anyone who can sit at this table can." Hearing her eldest brother's dismissal of her ability, Mary was surprisingly calm and looked at Elijah with a faint disdain in her eyes. "Don't wait for your hopeless son anymore, Elijah. If even I can't understand the drawing, then no one else would. Just take out the drawings, would you?" At this point, A shallow sense of self-satisfaction appeared in her eyes. To her surprise, though, Elijah smiled, shooting a puzzling glance at her, and asked, "Who told you I was waiting for someone in the family?" This time, Mary could not find a word to respond. Everyone looked at Elijah in shock, suspecting that this leader of theirs was not Elijah himself. The Terman family was a well-known robotic specialist. If the family members could not understand the drawing of the Dodge Tomahawk, then absolutely no outsiders could. Mary almost cried out, "Absolutely not. Elijah, stop kidding us." She stood up and looked almost angrily at Elijah across from her, feeling humiliated. Both Eber and Simon also frowned. They both agreed with what Mary said. If outsiders could understand the drawings and they could not, this would be the biggest shame of the Terman family. Just when they opened their mouths and wanted to say something, the door suddenly opened. Everyone looked back. So did Mary, who was annoyed and knew without thinking that it must be her errant nephew. She was only 25, the youngest among her siblings. Supposedly, she should be able to get along well with her nephew. But the opposite was true. The two of them were like oil and water. She had, on multiple times, thought of getting rid of her annoying nephew. But as Mary was thinking about this, she keenly saw Elijah, who was sitting in the head seat, finally open his half-closed eyes, and a light almost burst out of his dark green pupils. She then heard him whisper, "It's finally here." Who can make my stone-faced elder brother show such an expression? Mary turned her head back completely with this question in mind. Then she saw a slender figure walking alongside Carl. "It's a very young girl." Mary looked at the young and pretty Nicole. At first, she was wide-eyed, but quickly, a look of mixed feelings came up on her face. Eber and Simon also looked back. When they saw Nicole's face, there was a look of pleasant surprise in their eyes. This girl who was slowly approaching had a cold rosemary-like mysterious feeling in her and looked even prettier than Mary. The people sitting at the end of the table were closer to Nicole and received a greater visual impact. They all looked at Nicole and were lost for words. Nicole looked nonchalant despite all the stares. She felt that she had learned nothing else at the Royal Creek Institute, but her endurance against the stares from others had at least doubled. Carl had a hint of surprise in his eyes when he saw Nicole's insouciant face. The two ignored everyone around them and walked straight toward Elijah. Everyone was surprised to see that their leader, who had seemed to be uninterested in anything, had stood up and made a gesture of embrace. He watched as Nicole came over and gave her a gentle hug. "Thank you for coming, Nicole." Nicole did not resist. The courteous hug was just a social etiquette, and they had said goodbye in this way before. This was hardly surprising for Carl, but everyone was looking at what happened with their mouths agape. "We didn't know that our leader was so gentle." Even Eber and Simon had not snapped back from their surprise. What the hell is going on here? Who is this girl who received the highest level of treatment from our Elijah? Nicole ignored the others' glances. She and Carl sat down on either side of Elijah naturally. Elijah looked at Nicole with a smile and then instructed a servant, who was also in shock, to serve food. But at least, this servant of the Terman family, who was highly professional, quickly snapped back and went into the kitchen right away. Soon, everyone was served a sizzling sirloin steak. Nicole looked at the steak and smiled gently. After all these years, Elijah had still not forgotten her favorite medium well steak served with black pepper sauce. Elijah looked at Nicole's expression and was happy to know that she was pleased. He gently lifted the glass full of red wine, swirled it a little, and became the first person to clink glasses with Nicole. He then took a sip, looked at the rest of the people at the table, and slowly opened his mouth. "From today onward, Nicole will take full control of the investigation and handling of this incident. All of you need to cooperate and listen to her. So you all hear me clearly? Listen to this little girl." Everyone looked at Elijah, dumbfounded and incredulous, but still nodded because of his authority. Mary was the only person who looked defiantly at Nicole. Asked Elijah for this right many times, and he refused every time. When this brat came along, he immediately delegated his power to her. This is not good and proper. The steak was not to her taste, and she had no appetite for the meal anymore. Mary bitterly put cutlery in her hand on the plate in front of her, making a crisp clank, which was a subtle expression of her dissatisfaction. "I'm full. I will excuse myself first," she said. Although not a direct rejection of Elijah's decision, the move had silently challenged Elijah's authority. But Elijah could not care less about her. He nodded, then turned his head back as if he enjoyed talking to Nicole. Mary looked at Elijah's indifferent attitude toward her and trembled with anger. She blamed it all on Nicole for not being self-aware. She shot a glare at Nicole before going back to her room in a huff. Simon looked thoughtfully at Nicole with cold eyes and then also put down his cutlery, wiped the corners of his mouth, and stood up to leave. He did not even excuse himself, and it was already a provocation. But Elijah was sitting, unperturbed. Instead, it was Carl who gazed the back of Simon with a cold look in his eyes. Thinking of what Simon had done, Carl moved his hands, wanting to say something. Elijah suddenly pressed his hand down and shook his head at him, then continued to look at Nicole and smiled. "What do you think, Nicole?" Nicole cut the steak slowly and methodically, brought the sauced steak to her mouth, and chewed it slowly. Steaks were one of the few types of meat she liked. She took her time to chew and then swallowed the food in her mouth thoroughly before slowly saying, "It's not that difficult." Elijah heard her reply, and the smile on his face grew broader. He gently patted Carl on his hand before letting go of him and starting eating. With Nicole's assurance, he basically did not have to worry much. After the meal, someone took Nicole to the room that Elijah had prepared for her. Instead of asking Elijah how he got to know she was coming, Nicole gave Carl a meaningful look. Carl noticed the look in her eyes and winked at her apologetically. Nicole looked at him and shook her head helplessly before entering the room. She quickly took a shower. Just as she was drying her hair, someone knocked on the door and called out in Hustua-Bergian that sounded unnatural, "Nicole, I've brought what you want." Nicole recognized the voice. It was the stodgy man she had seen earlier. Her eyes lit up, and she quickly opened the door. To her surprise, she saw a huge chunk of things outside. But she was quick to say thank you. Then she walked over to the chunk of steel and effortlessly put her hand in. A few seconds later, she pulled out a tiny chip with 2 fingers. Eber watched what Nicole was doing and quickly understood what she was thinking. So he reminded her, saying, "It's useless, Nicole. We've already checked. The enemy has destroyed their robots abandoned on the battlefield, and we couldn't extract anything from them." Nicole looked at the man with a serious face and smiled. "It's okay. I will try." Then she turned and went back to her room, deliberately leaving the door open. Eber looked at Nicole from behind and knew that she was letting him watch from the sidelines. It just so happened that he was also eager to find out what kind of ability this young girl, whom his Elijah favored, possessed and if she was worthy of him listening to her. He politely took a few steps inside, kept a very polite distance, and watched what Nicole was doing. Nicole's expression remained unchanged. Eber saw her take out her battered computer and found that he had seen it somewhere before. Nicole did not give him much time to reminisce as she had connected the broken chip to the computer as if she was going to do something. Eber could not help but say again, "It's not going to work. We have asked the world's top hackers to do the repair, but the damage is too severe, even they could not find a solution." The undertone was that when even the world's top hackers could not fix it, Nicole was even less likely. But Nicole said nothing. She just looked at the reading progress bar on the computer screen and gently tapped on the desk rhythmically with her fingers. Eber frowned in disgust at her stubbornness of not listening to the advice of others. What's going on with her? I've told her that there is no way she can fix it. Does she think she is better than those top hackers in Macrunia? Thinking of this, he turned around and wanted to leave, not wanting to look at the result that he had seen countless times. All the previous attempts had failed. In his eyes, Nicole was a fool who had too high of an opinion of herself. But as Eber turned around, he heard an incredibly rapid keyboard tapping sound. A look of consternation flashed in his eyes, and then he spun back and took a look. This is by no means the speed a layman could do at. In the few seconds, while he was turning around, Nicole had activated her own restoration program, her fingers flowing over the keyboard so quick that Eber could barely see where she was typing. But the reading progress bar that had paused because of the broken chip had started to move rapidly. He could not help but come closer and take a careful look at the computer screen with incredulity in his eyes. This girl did it. Until the reading progress bar reached 100%, Nicole's hands still typed rapidly on the keyboard. She looked extremely focused and convincing to him. At least at this moment, even Eber had a ridiculous thought in his mind. Maybe this girl can really help my family solve the crisis. The progress bar moved quickly, but Nicole's fingers moved even quicker until the reading reached 100%. Yet she was still not stopping, but quickly following up with a stability maintenance program. Only then did she hit the enter key with a straight face. The robot's chip was the carrier of all its information and programs, and the identity of the enemy must also be stored inside. So the enemy had chosen to fry the chips when it was too late to clean up the battlefield strewn with the massive number of the wreckage of robots. Frying the chips was almost equivalent to destroying the robot's central nervous system and also cutting off the possibility of the Terman family tracing it to them and launching retaliation. The enemy had really been meticulously trying to cover their tracks. But it was a pity that they met Nicole. Eber was rooted to the spot as he looked at the layers of information that appeared in front of his eyes. This thing had bothered them for a long time, and in just 1 minute Nicole had solved it for them. He now realized that he should have known better when Elijah had such high regard for this girl. She was more than met the eyes. Nicole looked at the information and frowned. "It's the Thorne family. Do you guys have any vendetta against each other?" Eber frowned as he looked at the black umbrella-shaped family emblem on the screen. "I can't believe that it's them." The Terman and the Thorne families were once the closest partners. The Terman family was powerful, but they still looked after the Thorne family, entrusting them with projects. Even now, the Thorne family still maintained close contact with the Terman family. Yet they stole Terman's most sophisticated design drawings and became the most treacherous traitor in the Terman family's eyes. Eber looked grave. Being betrayed by the vassal family was nothing less than the greatest humiliation for the proud Terman family. Just as he wanted to turn around and go tell it to his other family members to retaliate against the Thorne family, Nicole said, "Hold your horse." She looked at the screen and narrowed her eyes. Eber looked back at Nicole in surprise, and he could not hold back his anger. As much as she is now his manager, she has no right to bypass his elder brother and make decisions by herself. "You have no reason to stop me," Eber said as he looked at Nicole warily. He had to say this out of his loyalty to the family. "I'm not trying to stop you." There was no emotion in Nicole's eyes. She tapped her finger gently and posed a question that struck Eber dumb. "Don't you want to know how the other party knows these secrets?" She looked up gently, her eyes bright like the still surface of a lake with the reflection of endless snowy mountains inside, looking extremely cold. Eber was rooted to the spot, almost instantly understanding the undertone of her voice. The next second, he heard Nicole's meaningful voice saying, "Let sleeping dogs lie for now." When Eber walked out the door, his eyes were filled with indescribable emotions. He nodded softly at Nicole, whom he had despised at first, with a faint hint of respect. "It must have been a long day. Take a rest early." Watching as the man hurried away, Nicole closed the door. Since Elijah had chosen Eber to send these things to her, it meant he trusted Eber. So there was no need for her to hide anything from him. Nicole gently touched the tiny chip in her hand, and she again rapidly typed on the keyboard, trying to find out more secrets. She soon noticed that a large part of the core creative technology seemed to be missing from the robots made by the Thorne family. Probably because of the immaturity of the core technology, the other party had blindly boosted the weapon's power at the expense of the robot's overall stability. The changed solution had reduced the requirements for raw materials, besides reducing the weight of the robots. This was why they could create and mass-produce robots suitable for short-term combat. After omitting the cooling system and stability maintenance mechanisms, the robots' mobility had been improved, but they had also become a walking bomb that may explode at any time. Its high lethality was not only against the enemy but also at itself. It could be seen from the images recorded in this chip that the entire robot looked highly self-destructive because of the lack of the most critical part of the core technology. This could be seen in the fact that although they could fight and defeat the Terman family's robots quickly because of their superiority in number, their robots self-destructed. Nicole thoughtfully looked at the battle data on the enemy's scrapped robot, the outstanding attack and almost failed defense values, and something came to mind. She pulled out a blank piece of paper and wrote on it casually. If the Terman family members were here, they would be surprised to find that the things that Nicole sketched out on the paper were actually the Terman family's core secret, the robot's design drawings. There were only 4 people in the Truman family possessing this drawing, but each of them had only a quarter of it. But Nicole could easily sketch the complete picture. She looked at the probably 2-man-tall model of the robot and slowly drew a large X on its top left. That's the part. While Nicole was looking at the drawings in her hand, someone knocked on the door. She quickly put the paper in her hand face down, and then responded by saying, "Come in." It was Carl. Nicole looked at him, who had covered himself from head to toe, and she cocked an eyebrow in surprise. "What are you doing?" she asked. Carl looked at Nicole and took off his mask, then said with a serious face, "Uncle Eber told me you have found out who the other party is." Nicole did not intend to hide it from him. She stood up and held her hand out to Carl. "It's the Thorne family." Carl took out another mask from his pocket and handed it to Nicole, then motioned at her to go. Nicole nodded. She slipped something into her pocket and walked out the door first. She glanced casually at the room at the far end of the corridor on the left, then left with Carl in tandem. Soon, the two of them, who were dressed in black, disappeared into the night. "Who lives in the far left room?" Carl heard her question and looked back at her with puzzlement, and then said with no hesitation, "Uncle Simon." Simon disliked sunlight, so he always lived in the corner. Nicole nodded. The room Elijah had prepared for her was in the middle on the 3rd floor, where several direct descendants of the Terman family lived, and this room faced the staircase, which gave a clear view of the entire hallway. So there was no hiding in front of her. She snickered at the thought of the sneaky figure on the left just now. Carl glanced at her with bafflement. He then quickly led Nicole toward the back door of the Terman manor while trying to throw her a black watch in his hand. "I've keyed the location into this spare gear of mine. Use this, since you are not equipped," he said. Nicole looked at Carl. She had excellent night vision and had almost seen the silvery glow in the distance. She tilted her head. Instead of taking what Carl wanted to hand her, she turned sideways and walked ahead. "Who told you I wasn't equipped?" Carl looked at Nicole with surprise. "She's fast," he thought, watching her walk to the back door, followed by hearing a roar that he was familiar with. That's the sound of the Dodge Tomahawk starting. In the silent night, such a roar could almost wake up the entire manor. Many windows lit up. Nicole looked up in a direction, with a cold look flashing in his eyes. Carl took a few quick steps and soon saw Nicole standing next to a motorcycle, which was big enough to sit 3 or 4 people, with a silvery white helmet in her hand. She threw it to him when she saw him coming. "Put it on." Nicole hopped onto the handsome motorcycle and gently tapped her right hand on the floating dashboard a few times. One of the compartments opened, and something slowly emerged. It was a thin silvery white bracelet, looking inorganic. It lay quietly on its back, already separated from the middle, as if waiting for something. Nicole put her left hand on it, and soon the bracelet was activated with a stream of light flashed across the surface of it. The otherwise inconspicuous metal surface started to glitter, as if it had finally broken through some kind of seal, and snapped back in the palm of Nicole's hand, becoming a complete circle. It made an electronic sound that was no different from that of the Dodge Tomahawk, seemingly having an indescribable sense of joy. "Welcome back." A smile came on Nicole's face. "Switch to dark mode. As you wish." Subsequently, the bracelet started to change color, from dazzling silver to dull black gold that would not cause any inconvenience at night. As Nicole flicked her hand gently, the bracelet adjusted its size automatically and snapped snugly on Nicole's wrist. It became so inconspicuous that it was almost impossible to see she was wearing something. Carl put on the helmet and watched with a smile as Nicole adjusted the gear. Seeing Nicole turn her head to look at him, he smirked helplessly. "Nothing can escape my father's eyes," he said. Elijah must have guessed in advance what the two were going to do, so he had thoughtfully got the Dodge Tomahawk ready here. Nicole looked at Carl's expression and smiled. She cocked an eyebrow and said, "Do you remember when we went to the Callaway auction house together?" The place was hundreds of miles away, and Elijah supported us in the same way. Carl seemed to remember what had happened back then and laughed. We were too young back then. Nicole looked at Carl and smiled again. Let's go. It's time. Carl nodded, and he found he could see Nicole's face clearly despite the darkness. They had grown up together and known each other until now. Everything was as usual and had not changed. How nice. The silvery white motorcycle faded into a stream of cold light, speeding toward a direction in the darkness of the night. There was an uproar in the manor behind them. Nicole and Carl had left before they knew it, but many people still recognized what the light just now was. Simon pushed open Elijah's door, shouting with anger. What the hell are you doing? Who took the Dodge Tomahawk? Only Elijah had the authority to start the Dodge Tomahawk, and it was definitely he who brought it out to someone. It was too dark for him to see clearly just now, but as he looked at Eber and Mary who were chasing after him, he turned to look at his eldest brother. Does he know about the distinctive features of the Dodge Tomahawk? Eber and Mary behind them saw the two confronting each other and did not speak. Yet their eyes were also looking at Elijah, as they desperately wanted him to give them an answer. Elijah looked at this third brother and paid no attention to the silent two behind him. He lifted his hand. His eyes still had the slothful squint, looking extremely nonchalant. You're questioning me? When Simon was asked that question, beads of sweat slowly emerged from the tip of his nose. He slowly lowered his head and cursed inwardly for being made a tool. For him to question Elijah like that, with his authority as the head of the Turman family, he did not even need to move his fingers for someone below to do him in. No. Elijah did not make things difficult for his little brother as he motioned for everyone to leave, yet Mary, standing on the side, asked coldly, Did you give the Dodge Tomahawk to Carlisle? The moment the Dodge Tomahawk was mentioned, everyone's gaze focused once again on Elijah. Although they could not challenge his authority, they at least had the right to know who the Dodge Tomahawk belonged to now. Elijah looked at the group, and many outstanding members of the branch families had also gathered around as all of them stared intently at him. If Elijah had handed the Dodge Tomahawk to Carlisle, that meant the latter was basically the next head of the family, while everyone else would have lost the said opportunity. A tinge of iciness appeared in Mary and Simon's eyes. The previous head of the Turman family, their father, had 2 wives. Unlike Elijah, the 3 of them were from the second wife. Aside from Mary, who inherited the same blonde hair and blue eyes, both Simon and Eber's eyes color were not the Turman family's iconic blue but the far more normal brown. Mary's beautiful eyes were sharp and cold as she looked at her elder brother. It was as if once he said yes, something would be very different. Elijah let out a mysterious smile, with a faint trace of mockery on his face. Did you guys really take the Dodge Tomahawk as the property of the Turman family? He snorted coldly as he turned to Simon. Are you not the person supervising the mobile armor's production line? Have you not realized that the Turman family had just been copying that all this while and had not created a new, different model after so many years? Upon hearing that, Simon and the rest were stunned. It was not like they had not considered this issue in the past few years. Although the Turman family was a family of mechanical experts, they did not have the production and design capability for top-end mobile armors. Even the ones they created were only generic and were not capable of being deployed onto the battlefield. However, when their father gave them a mobile armor design blueprint 5 years ago, everything changed. Aside from Elijah, no one knew where the blueprint that brought the rise of the Turman family came from. After their father passed away, the blueprint was divided into 4. It was his way of showing absolute fairness to his 4 children. However, that resulted in the Turman's mobile armor stagnating and remaining at the same level as a few years ago. All simply because they did not trust one another and were not willing to share the blueprint. Elijah looked at the group of speechless folks before him. His eyes were cold, with a tinge of disappointment in them. Mary quickly reacted as she frowned at her brother and said, But that is not an excuse for you to activate the Dodge Tomahawk as you please. As the most talented person in the Turman family, and the only person who could fabricate a mobile armor using 1/4 of the blueprint she had, that was the basis of her confidence in confronting Elijah. In the end, Mary believed that Carlisle, who had not lived with the Terman family since young and was only taken back to the family at 15 by Elijah, was not equipped with the ability to own the Dodge Tomahawk. She should be the true master of the Dodge Tomahawk. Elijah looked at his little sister, and he did not need to think much to know what she was thinking. He then smiled. "I did not activate the Dodge Tomahawk as I please," he slowly said. "I simply returned it to its true master." Everyone was stunned hearing this as they looked at Elijah in disbelief, seemingly not understanding what he was saying. He didn't give it to Carlisle, but to its true master. What is the meaning of this? Mary looked at her eldest brother and wanted to ask something, yet Elijah was not in the mood to say anything more. He turned to walk back to the sofa in his room, his back facing the group of people, exuding an aura for everyone to see themselves off. Simon gave the bitter Mary a look. He gently tugged her hand and slowly shook his head. Eber had already left the room. His pace was quick. He soon arrived at the room at the center of the 3rd floor and gave it a few gentle knocks. Sure enough, there was no response. Deep in the night, a private plane landed. Jared slowly got out of the plane. Janice, on the other hand, had been waiting for him for a long time. After arriving at the office at the base, Jared gave him a deep look before saying, "Have you found out who did it?" Janice opened the tablet in his hand and pulled the data out as he handed it over to Jared. "Boss, I think it's the Rising Thorn family who had gotten the permission from the Macrunian government. Who did it? They seem to be relying on the strongest family in Macrunia, the Terman family, to grow rapidly. Based on our investigations, the Thorn family had betrayed their master and created a great crisis for them, but the Terman family doesn't seem to know it for now. Boss, should we let them know this fact? As the saying goes, the enemy of my enemy is my friend." Moreover, the Terman family was also very powerful. More so after both of them were screwed over by the Macrunian government and the Thorn family. Jared looked at the information Janice had pulled out, and the snake-tailed crest of the Terman family looked particularly conspicuous. His eyes then lit up. "Did I not see the same pattern on the Dodge Tomahawk back in Nottingbrook? But why was that Dodge Tomahawk there?" Jared smiled mysteriously as he handed the pad back to Janice and raised his eyebrows slightly. "Of course we should tell them. Why shouldn't we make ourselves of such a powerful ally?" Janice looked at Jared's seemingly confident look as a look of doubt appeared in his eyes. "How is boss so sure that the Terman will believe us or even treat us as an ally? Wouldn't it be bad if they turn around and bite us instead?" However, it was not his place to question his boss's decision as he soon pulled out a communicator from his pocket and spoke to the other side.
Thank you for listening. If you have enjoyed this story, please like and share so others can see it too. Also hit the subscription button and notification bell so you can be notified on our next release. Thank you for your support. God bless you.